Yeah, how are you?
We appreciate you coming out and talk to us about mental health and what you do as a social worker with mental health. And I guess we'll get this journey started.
Let's do it.
All right. So my first question for you. Before your journey in America, what was your life and culture like?
Well, I am Nigerian, and I am not from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm from the country. I live like 4 hours away from Lagos. I grew up somewhere around like Salisbury, very quiet, a lot of people, everybody kind of knows everybody. It was very different, to say the least. Food is different, culture is different, specifically in terms of human behavior. You know, we can talk to each other, we can cuss each other out, we can engage in scares. But here, everything is different. If you do something on the outside, your mom and your aunt and everybody in the neighborhood will know it. It's a different shift. I suppose as a teenager, when you come here, you're like, what? It's just a whole culture shock. But I loved it in Nigeria. It was peaceful where I came from, at least the part of Nigeria I came from. It was very quiet. It was enjoyable. It was serene with a lot of bushes. And it's not what you see on TV, houses everywhere, dirt everywhere. It's quiet. And I like that. I like that very much. I also went to a boarding school, so that gave an extra layer of experience. You know, when you're a child and you leave the house, you go to learn from a whole bunch of other kids. And then you come back and everybody's like, what happened to work? So it was nice. I loved living in Nigeria. I will go back.
Okay. So what led you to come to America and why did you leave your people?
I mean, good question. I suppose I graduated high school and my parents thought it was a fabulous idea to go to college in the US. And so, like most people, I came here strictly for the education. Because let's just be honest, it is better than where we came from in terms of hands-on experience. The actual education might be more intense in Nigeria because you get to read the book and you get to take the exam. Everything is essay. But in terms of having the equipment to actually practice with and things like that, we don't have that. There's no electricity, so we can't run an MRI machine 24 hours a day. So it's a little tricky. I think at 16 when I came, the idea is you go to college, you graduate, and come back. But of course that changed because it's 20 years and I'm still here.
So was there any difficulty transitioning to the American ways when you experienced the American culture?
Difficulty. That's an understatement. It's a whole challenge. See, I believe I came in December. So the snow, like I saw it in Christmas movies in Nigeria, okay? I knew what it was. I'm not stupid, but to actually feel it, I don't like that. I still don't like the winter. The culture here you see something in the movies and then you come and you're like, I came in through JFK too, so that was just terrible. And I'm like, this stinks. This our airport in Nigeria is better than this. What are we doing? But overall, the culture shock was very stressful. I went to Baltimore City Community College. It was funny because I had the option between Community College of Baltimore County, which is kind of like Warwick, very calm, there's nothing going on, and I had Baltimore City Community College. I went to both of them, and I was like, well, I like this is everybody look like me. And that didn't work out. Because quickly you realize that it's not really about what people look like in terms of skin color. It's really about who they are as a person. And I learned that very, very quickly because you think we look alike so we're good, but then like nobody wants to sit beside you in class because you got that, curry smell. When they talk, what'd you say? I can't understand you. Talk louder. It's just, so you're trying to learn and you're paying for the education, but when you ask a question to the instructor is waiting for another student to translate. But I'm speaking English. English is my first language. The transition was rough. The challenge was knowing who you are. But that can be difficult at 16 though, right? Who else is 16 around here? Anybody 16? Okay. Do you have some kind of idea who you are? You know your name, right? Okay. She said that's it. Well, what about you? Maybe you're doing a little better.
He's not 16.
He's not 16.
Why are you being a clown?
Double the age.
What are you, 32?
You won't believe it.
I won't believe it. We can move
23.
23. Well, even at 23, I think adolescent goes to 26 these days. Okay, at 26 years old, if you're acting stupid, then I'm like, get it together. But if you're 24, I'm like, sit down, let's go. Okay, what's going on? So 23, you're.
So while you came here at the age of 16 and you were seeking education, was social work and mental health always the desired fields you wanted to pursue, or were you pursuing different different education routes?
I'm Nigerian. Social work? You're supposed to be a doctor, a pharmacist, or a civil engineer, architect, you know, all those big
Employer.
Yeah, no. Actually, believe it or not, you know, like in high school here where you do, the last 2 years of high school, you start picking some more structured classes that you want to do in Warwick or whatnot. I was a heart student, is what we call it, but it's not heart like drawing in the US. It's like government, English literature, and things like that. So I was never, in my whole family, I was never into science. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate it because where I'm from, you could specialize in government and economics and literature, but you're still taking that chemistry, whether you like it or not. It's not an option. You're taking chemistry, you take it further math, like algebra. But I never wanted to be a doctor or anything like that. So when I came here, I was like, okay, I graduated, I'm very good. You know, I wanted to be some kind of lawyer, some kind of advocate. I was never gonna be a criminal lawyer either. I can't stomach that. I was always gonna be, you know, some kind of advocate and things like that. But then I came here and a couple of uncles and some aunties said, you have accents, nobody will hear you in court. Go and do nursing job. That's what it said. I said, okay. So when I went to BCC, I was pre-nursing. I wanted to do nursing. And then one uncle rolled through the house one day and said, you do nursing, you are a gay. You can't do nursing. Pharmacy is what you should do. You make a lot of money doing pharmacy, switch to pharmacy. And everybody like, yeah, pharmacy is. I was like, okay. So of course, started taking a whole bunch of chemistry classes and whatnot. While I passed those classes because they were not entirely new to me, I hated every one of them. Because I do not care about chemicals. That's not my thing. Like I love to know about human body, but just tell me the basic hair highs. I don't want to see kidneys. No, that's not my thing. So I suppose you let people control your life for so many years, eventually you are going to snap. And well, immigrants here for the most part, when you snap, folks don't like it. they just don't. And that's pretty much what happened. So no, it was never going to be social work. Where I'm from, there is nothing like social work. It's not a thing. The community just help whoever needs help or the family. But here, in my quest to find what I needed to do in terms of getting into social work, I transferred from BCC to SU, and I was tired of sciences. And it was called Karuta Hall at the time. It was a tiny little old social work building in SU. And I walked into that building, and a nice lady up front said, can I help you? I said, yes, what do you do here? Because I saw social work, School of Social Work, and I'm like, what's social work? I mean, back then, it was not like there was Google everywhere. It was like just walk in and ask the question, and I did. And she was like, you know what? One of our advisors have some time, come on in. And that was it. I was like, really? You get to help people, you get to help children. Okay. So of course I registered for my next class, and the first class, that instructor said, if you're in here for the money, you're in the wrong major. I was like, well, damn. Why can't I help people and make somebody doing it at the same time? But that's how I got into social work. It was never the plan at all. As a matter of fact, it was a whole journey. personally, in terms of personal growth, and a whole journey with my people. I still believe that a lot of people don't understand what I do and don't like what I do because they don't understand what I do. But that's all right, because, at some point you just don't care anymore, folks. You're young, so you probably should still care and listen, but you get to a point where you know who you are, and at that point, it becomes very easy for you to explain to people what you want to do. But the difference is at 22, 23, 24 years old, they will give you their opinion, you will listen without cussing them out, and be like, okay, but this is really what I'm doing. And it has to be okay. Even if you fail, it's fine, it's whatever. You try something else. It's just how it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you came here at an early age, around 16, and then you were doing all these science classes, and then you eventually got to social work. What kept you motivated? What kept you, involved with your classes and stuff? Like, at a young age, discipline is really hard for a lot of people at that age. What kept you disciplined?
Man, if you've been told for years that the only reason you're in America is to go to school, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean you're not going to go out here doing something else. And I'm not going to tell you I was a saint. But I think it comes to that point where, remember I said I went to boarding school? So for the most part, I went to boarding school at 9 years old. I left at 16. The old time was in boarding school. So when I got home, it was time to come to the US. So let's just say I was used to not having family or people to kind of sort of guide me. So even in the US, without a whole bunch of people, I could have fun and still do what I know I needed to do, even when it was classes that I hated with passion. I know that a lot of people, a lot of children are not like that, and I think that it took some time to get over the trauma of boarding school at such a young age. But there was a lot of blessings in it. Because even though it was, a lot of the experience there was terrible, there was that independence that you had to develop when you didn't have a choice. And so you don't focus on everything that went wrong when you were 10. You try to focus on what you got out of it at 16. I think, just generally speaking, that was the switch for me. You stop being angry and you start giving gratitude, and things begins to fall into place. You just focus. It takes time, though.
Okay. So after you get into social work and everything, when did the desire to get into mental health become a part of your life?
That's a good question. Mental health is not a thing where we're from. If you see somebody on the street with a manic episode, immediately is, maybe it's the grandma that did it, or the auntie, or it's always somebody that did it. It's always some supernatural something. And so, coming to the US, I wanted to help people and be a lawyer and advocate it in the court, but I was never planning to get in people's head. That was never the plan, because I didn't know anything about mental health when I came here. And I came from highly medical parents and highly educated parents. My mom is a teacher, my dad is in the medical field, but mental health, you don't talk about it. Fast forward many years later, I realized that, what one of my aunts had was postpartum mania back then. But I didn't know at the time. They just put her to sleep with a new baby. And, I just realized she slept for like a week. But I didn't know what it was until I was like, that's a good information. I'm a female in the same family. I should know if we have postpartum depression or mania or anything like that. You don't talk about it. But when I got here and I started doing social work, I still didn't particularly, like when you don't know something, you don't think about it. But then my last year of social work, we did social work in mental health. And I was like, I like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I love working with families and children and, child protective services, but I like the mental health part of things, too. But at the time, I wasn't trying to get into that because my passion for families and children, I just hate children being abused and molested and things like that. It just triggers. So that was my original passion. And I worked with DSS, Somerset County, Worcester County, foster care, adoption, family services. Name the department I worked in, except for FIA. With food stamp and stuff, I didn't do that. And then I realized that when you have a child that was abused come into care, and you get them in foster care, whatever the case may be, then what happens to that child after that? What happens to the mom of that child after that? I realized that a lot of kids just never made it back to their original families, and I'm like, well, clearly there's a disconnect. And the disconnect is the mom is not getting the help that she needs to be a good mom. The kid is not getting the help that this child needs to transition in and out of all these different places we're putting them. I was like, okay, this is just the peripheral. I need to go a little deeper. And that's why I slowly but surely made the switch to social work. Again, trying to work with families and children. But then I realized that, oh crap, this, all these kids, it's not necessarily the kids, it's the adults. And then of course, if I realize if I can get the parents straight, then it's easier to work with the children. Because then the parents know what they're supposed to be telling the kids and how they're supposed to be interacting with the kids. And I was like, okay, we'll let somebody else take care of the babies. Let me switch to the adults. Because I could never, I love children, but they can't speak. And I can't read minds. So I'm like, switch to the adults. So for the most part now, I provide mental health with adults and teenagers. Still can't do babies. Even my babies I can't do. Like, I need you to get older. Because when they're young, they're so dependent on you, and the pressure of you being okay enough to take care of them, that's a lot of work. And a parent knows that. Even if you just babysit children, you know that they're looking at you for everything. So if the parent is okay, then the family is going to be fine. It's a tricky endeavor because you gotta deal with everybody so uniquely. What works for this lady right here will not work for her, and it's definitely not going to work for you. By default, it's not, because everybody is uniquely different. The switch is interesting, and mental health specifically was not the plan from the job. My story is not that sweet. Yeah. It's a whole, it's all over the place until you figure it out. And then it becomes a little easier every day.
All right, so with education out of the way, let's go back to when you first got into this country. How was your social life? Like, after you got past that awkward phase, like, you were a person that went out, or were you a person that stayed to yourself? Did you have many friends? Like, what was Ganiyat like in the beginning to like right now?
Do I look like I said to myself, nah, man, nah, Like I said before, I had my time, I had my ways, but you said something, you said after you got the transition out of the way. I think as an immigrant, you never get the transition out of the way. And especially back then, transition out of the way. You just stop caring. You just don't care about what people say anymore. You just doesn't bother you. You can't say my name, honey, I do not care. Can I call you G? No, it's Ganiyat. Ganiyat. You don't want to hold up the class and just say, okay, no, my name is Ganiyat. And oh, my maiden name is even longer. You just don't care anymore. I had a robust social life back then. Let's say it like this. I went to SU. But all my friends were in UMBS, including my husband, who likes to throw parties. So yeah. At the time, It wasn't a Volkswagen, of course. It was more the boyfriend, but his house was the party house. So yeah, no. It was, I think it was necessary though. And once again, I wasn't used to it. I came from a boarding school where we were supposed to be in school, but still we know, like in the back of the bush, there is a little crack on the wall that you can go out and do whatever you gotta do and come back in, you know. So the transition, I think there were moments where I got carried away with the social piece of things. Wasn't necessarily peer pressure, it was just me. When we would go to parties and stuff in Nigeria, I had an immediate older brother who is always like Ubering, you know. But here there was no Ubering, so I'm just like to myself. And I also had a car, so I could really go wherever I wanted. I think that ultimately that was necessary. I think every young person here, having a teenager myself now, I can see that sheltering kids from everything doesn't help. That's why sometimes I do tell parents, you have to trust your child enough to let them do some things. And you have to trust yourself enough that you've taught them enough to let them do some things. If you don't allow the child to do anything at all, then you're not getting them ready for 17 when you ship them off to college in Texas, you know. So ultimately, social life was great. I'm glad I had that experience because now, at 36 or whatever, I am happy to say that I don't miss it because I had fun. And now when I see young people going partying, I'm like, have fun. But when I see a 35-year-old, okay, maybe I don't need to finish that statement. And I see a 35-year-old acting a damn fool, I'm like, girl, you miss your 20s, didn't you? You know, it's just how it is. Right.
Nice. Well, now that you became a mental health social worker, why should people take mental health into consideration, especially where this is a Haitian domination church, basically? We're trying to transition into both American and Haitian. Besides the point. Anyway.
Oh no, besides it all.
But, why should mental health be taken seriously? Because a lot of times in the Haitian community, if you admit that you have some mental issues, it's like admitting a weakness. Why should we encourage people to admit that they have mental health issues?
That is a loaded question. And I'll tell you why. You can't convince anyone to be comfortable with someone else having a mental health challenge. And I think the problem, and it's a problem, is actually an epidemic in immigrants, not just Asian, Nigerian, South American, it doesn't matter. The problem with mental health and mental illnesses in immigrants community, especially Asian and African, because that's what I'm familiar with from the shore, and Hispanic, of course, is that we see it as a problem. It is not a problem. It is a challenge. Mental illness is not much different from any other medical diagnosis. But even I realize that the same immigrant population that struggles with mental health diagnosis also struggles with medical diagnosis. So it's not just isolated. You can see this auntie, and you're looking at her, and her foot is swollen. And you're like, auntie, your foot is swollen, you're touching it, and it's like, maybe you should go and see the doctor for this thing. I don't know, I drank that herb that grandma brought me the other day. And I'm like, you need to go and see your doctor. Do you have diabetes, like high sugar? I don't know. High blood pressure? Have you ever been to the doctor? 4 years ago when my daughter first me. And I'm like, that's not even a mental health diagnosis. That's a clear and obvious medical issue. So they struggle with that, let alone something that they don't even understand. The auntie is not stupid. She's probably incredibly smart. She's probably a nurse. But yet, she's not going to the doctor for her home foot. Or yet, she's not going to the doctor because her back has been hurting for 6 months. But she's not going. She would put warm compress. She would have somebody mash it. It's just all those things. So when you think about mental health in immigrant communities, you realize quickly that it's not an isolated situation. It's an epidemic of self-neglect. We come here and we're so focused on making it that we forget everything else. You don't want to go get that back checked out because you got to work. Because you got to work so you can take care of this and that. Who's going to take care of you? Where are you going to take care of you? Mental health specifically though, you know when your foot is swollen, somebody else can easily convince you to go. Or maybe you just get numb and you can't walk anymore. So of course you have to go to the ER. With mental health, it doesn't work that way. And that's the problem. Most mental health conditions don't start at 42, unless there is a really difficult life experience. They start at 9, 11, 14, 19, 22, 29. Like, it's very progressive. You see a child at 5 years old that just likes to jump off the wall. And you're like, oh, this child is just so very active. Well, that active child unchecked at 9 starts to do something else, like you're talking to the child and you go like this. And you're like, okay. It's just that puberty is puberty. And then puberty passes, it's 16, and that child, you talk to them, they just walk away. Or they walk back at you. Or they stay in their friend's house for 2 weeks. You know, just they start doing stupid stuff. But that's because you didn't catch it from the beginning. Having a child or even being an adult and talking to a counselor does not always require you to have schizophrenia or bipolar or any of those other severe mental illnesses. I always tell new immigrant families that come to the US, if you have a child older than 6, the moment you settle into the US, a year or 2, you need to get that child into counseling. It's not a big deal, it's the adjustment disorder. Because yes, they are adjusting. You just uprooted them from everything they know and then you expected them to be okay. They're not going to be okay. Just have them talk to somebody. I mean, you have to find a therapist that is culturally competent, but it doesn't hurt. If you can't find a therapist, get them involved in a church group. Get them involved in a community event. Get them out of the house doing things with other people. Don't isolate them. We isolate too much. We only talk to our home. So when it comes to mental health, specifically in immigrant communities, especially as you said earlier, you're trying to transition from American, trying to integrate. That's going to be a challenge because it's a Haitian congregation. There's always going to be that Asian factor in it. And I think that's beautiful. Any African American or Caucasian or Hispanic person, individual that walks through that door already knows what you do here. They didn't just kind of sort of stray in here. And if they're coming in here, that's because they are already open-minded. You didn't have to convince them. Maybe the videos that you post will be more, English and then Creole and whatnot, but you don't have to try too hard because the last thing you want is to transition and now you have half of your congregation that is not Asian and you are in a position where you're pressured to kind of sort of shed some of your own characteristics to make other people comfortable. As immigrants, I feel like when we get in our own space, it is okay for other people to come in and adjust to what we do. They can do that. We don't always have to go the other side. We go to the middle, and then we expect people to come to the middle. When I started the practice, I made sure that my specialty was working with immigrant families and children. Despite the fact that on the Eastern Shore, we don't seek help. I can count in one hand how many actual immigrant families and children I have right now, and I can count in two hands how many I've worked with on the shore in the last 5 years. We don't seek help. We just don't. And like I said, the reason is not just cultural. It's just our perspective about the world is different. We see medical and mental health conditions as problems. They're not. It is just part of the natural body process, and it's part of the natural mental process. I think we all can do more. Many of us here are educated, at least the adults here. We are all educated. And I think you don't need a degree in social work or counseling to be able to educate other folks around us what it is that a mental health situation looks like. We've all seen it. We've all been to somebody's house in your life. That's a problem. But you can't say it. But because if you say it, somebody's going to take it personal. You know? We need to do more communicating with ourselves instead of being worried that somebody else is going to take it too personally. I do it all the time when I'm around immigrant families. But I think it's easy for me to do because I'm in the field and they will take me more seriously. If you do it, Jack, they're like, you're not a counselor. Why are you talking to me about my child in hell? You know what I mean? But we need to do more talking and communicating instead of just giving everything to God or thinking that somebody else did it, you know, some voodoo stuff. Why you gotta be like that? Did you see his face? It was like, I'm serious.
Yeah, it's like the stereotype of Haitians and voodoo and stuff. Like, oh, here we go.
No, I'm Nigerian. It's our stereotype too.
Yeah, the black stereotype.
Oh, no. Where I'm from, if you have headache, your stepmom do it. If you have diarrhea, it's your father's ex-wife. It's always somebody else that did something. And this is a wrong word. If somebody died young and they don't know why, yeah, it's the same thing where I'm from. So you can't tell them nothing. You can't tell them nothing. If they have headache, they will say they are going to the pastor to pray. But you've been having this headache and back pain and hand pain for 3 months. This sounds like stroke in the making. It is not even, nobody is doing anything to you. But it is, that's why I said when I talk about specific, country, I just say immigrants because I think to a certain extent, all of our cultures are just very slightly different. I've talked to a lot of Hispanic people that have the same voodoo situation. They just think about it differently. Oh, Jamaicans, everybody, somebody did everything. It's always somebody else's fault. So it's not just Asian, it's all of it. There's always that element of distrust in medicine. So we're always thinking, oh, God is just mad at you. How do you know God is mad at somebody? Are you God? You're not God. Mind your business. So if it's not somebody that did it, it's the devil. If it's not the devil, it's because God is mad. Which one is it? Maybe you just need, medication. And that fixes it, So when I say voodoo, honestly, it's not just an Asian thing. In my experience, personally as a Nigerian or as an African, quite frankly, and in other Hispanic culture or Caribbean cultures that I've talked to, same thing, no difference.
Wow. That's real interesting. But before I talk about my last question, we're going to have a Q&A session right after this, so get your questions ready. But Ms. Ganiyat, here's the final question. What advice do you have for today's generation when creating and pursuing goals that have an immigrant background?
Well, you probably already picked it up in what I said.
Say that one more time.
Read that one more time.
The question again is, what advice do you have for today's generation when creating and pursuing goals that have an immigrant background?
Okay. Excuse me?
Closer to your age, so I don't know
Boy, Brian.
Yeah,
I like him. He's the clown. He's gonna be a good leader someday.
Say about it. Great leader.
don't tell him any lies.
No. I would never say
Get that
that.
IET.
I think ultimately the idea is to listen to yourself. I think I made it clear that for the first 5 years or so of my education, I was doing everything that everyone told me that I should be doing. And that led to an incredible waste of time. And I believe that the reason that I listened and went along was because I didn't want to get anybody mad. And you know how when you get your folks mad, they don't talk to you, your aunt don't talk to you, your brother, they will be calling you from Nigeria mad at you. Like, I haven't seen you in 10 years, I do not care. Like, everybody, the whole community is mad at you because you are not doing what you've been told. If you are here and there is something that you would rather be doing, if your mom has told you that you are just going to be an engineer all of your life, but you like to draw, it becomes a challenge. The first thing you get a hear is, how will you make money doing that? I cannot feed you for the rest of your life. Like, they will tell you. African immigrant parents will tell you, like, they're working, they're behind up working 3 jobs, and you want to go draw? Have you lost your mind? You know, it makes sense. The only issue is they don't sit you down and ask you what your plan is. They don't give you alternative. Clearly that child is interested in art. Maybe you don't think you can make money drawing on the canvas, but can we get that child interested in other forms of art that can make that child money? You know what I'm saying? If you're an immigrant, there is more out there to do than sciences and STEM. If you love it, do it. Do it. Be cardiothoracic surgeon. I don't know. Go do it. But if you don't like it, find something else that appeals to you. And make sure you can make a living doing it. There is nothing more frustrating than you going to school for 4 years to do something that you can't pay rent from. And if you're not sure what you're going to go do in college, you can take a moment. Take a year off. Go figure yourself out. Because it doesn't make sense to rack up student loan that you have to pay back on things you will never use. Because I know that's also a problem. So where we're from, you graduate high school, you go. You can't take a break. Why? Why? No. Go while your brain is fresh. You're young. The brain is always going to be fresh. It's not about that anymore. It becomes personal perseverance. Do you have the resilience necessary to follow your goals? Not your passion, because the passion don't be making you money sometimes, and that becomes a problem. But make it a goal. Break it down and do it. But you have to know what you're doing, folks. Up until I opened the practice, which is only 3 years ago, a lot of my immediate family were still naive about what I do. And when I said, oh, by the way, I opened a practice, what? What do you do there? I'm like, provide mental health. So what do you do there? How are you going to be highly educated and still stupid at the same time? Like, common sense. It's not common, you know. Generally speaking, I would rather sit and talk to people all day than be on my foot for 10 hours as a pharmacist or as a nurse. No, I'm not doing that. I'd rather be able to schedule my clients and be flexible, even when I was employed by people. I know when I went to work at 8:30, I'm done at 4, and I'm coming home. My day is over. It's done. I don't have to work different shifts. I don't have to 3 to 11. All of that logistic wasn't for me. Partly because I never truly liked that field anyway. It wasn't my goal. The question is, immigrant children, how do they decide what they want to do in an immigrant community? Like, how do you balance that? It will take you time. But when you figure out what it is that you want to do, you have to be persistent about it. And you have to make sure that you don't get too lost. I know that, I say too lost because I know it's almost impossible to not kind of sort of be shoved into whatever it is they want you to do. But eventually you are going to make that switch. Just try not to let it take 5 years like I did, because it was an incredible waste of time. Is that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Ganiyat?
Everybody. Hot seat.
Not everybody go at once.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So coming from like your family,
For the camera.
for the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be loud enough for them.
Stand up. Your voice sounds terrible in the mic.
Don't worry. It's
Mic
okay.
check 1 2.
Oh, check.
I might become a rapper anyway,
Oh.
so check it.